The alien ship soared through the dark expanse of space, its sleek surface cutting through the cold silence. On board, there was only one passenger, the alien girl, a scientist named Zetra. She was on a mission to explore a planet known for its strange inhabitants. Zetra had studied many species before, but humans were different. To her, they were primitive and far below her own people in terms of intelligence and technology. She had read about them, watched their behavior in videos, but she never expected to come face to face with one. As the ship touched down on the planet's surface, Zetra felt a rush of excitement. This was her first time visiting Earth, and she was eager to see the humans for herself. She stepped off the ship, her boots making a soft crunch on the soil. The air was thick and warm, filled with the scent of plants and something unfamiliar. It was alive, buzzing with energy. She didn't need to wait long. A human approached her, a young man who appeared to be in his late 20s. His hair was messy, his clothes simple but practical. He had a curious expression on his face as he looked at Zetra. She could tell he was intrigued by her alien features, but also confused. It wasn't every day you saw a being with blue skin, large eyes, and a slender frame like hers. "Hello," the man said, his voice hesitant but friendly. He extended his hand in greeting, a gesture Zetra found strange. She had read about it, but it felt odd to her. Did he want to touch her? She hesitated, then raised her own hand slowly, mimicking the gesture. "Greetings," she said, her voice calm and controlled. Her language was complex, but she knew humans could understand simple words. The man smiled, showing teeth, which she had learned was a human sign of friendliness. "You're an alien, right?" he asked, his tone still full of curiosity. Zetra nodded. "Yes, I am. I come in peace." She wanted to keep things formal. After all, this wasn't just an encounter, it was a mission. The man looked her up and down, clearly fascinated. "So, what's it like being an alien? I mean, like in the movies." He seemed to be asking about the human portrayals of aliens, extraterrestrials in strange ships, conquering planets or performing bizarre rituals. Zetra rolled her eyes inwardly. Humans had such wild imaginations. They often misrepresented alien cultures in their stories. "I am not here to conquer," she said firmly. "I am here for knowledge." His grin widened. Yeah, I know, just joking around, but hey, you've probably heard all those weird things humans do, like the stuff they do in bed, like Doggy style." Zetra blinked, processing his words. She had read about such things in human texts, but she had never really understood them. Humans had many strange rituals, and this particular one, as described, seemed almost too ridiculous to be true. She assumed it was some kind of joke or misunderstanding. "Doggy style," she repeated, her voice flat, clearly confused. "What do you mean?" The man's eyes lit up, thinking he had made some kind of breakthrough in communication. "It's, well, like a position. You do it when you're intimate." His smile was sly, as if he was sharing a forbidden secret. Zetra's expression didn't change. She had no idea what he was talking about, but she wasn't about to let him know that. Her mission was important, and she had to focus. But she couldn't help but wonder if this was part of the human's fascination with the bizarre and the strange. She had read about their odd ideas of attraction, but she hadn't expected it to be brought up so soon. She took a step back, trying to distance herself from this peculiar conversation. "I do not wish to discuss such things with you," she said, her voice growing colder. But the man didn't seem to take offense. He just chuckled, as though he thought she was playing along. "It's fine, I get it. You probably don't know much about humans. But believe me, when you do, you'll see why it's so funny. We have some unique habits, Zetra couldn't help but feel a little disturbed by the idea. She had learned that humans were often unpredictable, their behaviors driven by a mix of curiosity and emotion. But this was something else. "I have studied many things about your species," she said slowly, "but this I don't think I need to know." She turned away, ready to head back to her ship, but the man followed her, still grinning. I'm just messing with you, he said. I'm sure you'll figure it out. But hey, you seem like you're here to learn, right? Well, if you ever want to see the real Earth, let me know. I can show you around. Zetra paused. There was something strange about this human, something almost too casual, too playful for her liking. But she realized that this was part of the experience. Human interaction wasn't like anything she had read about. It was raw, unpredictable, and full of surprises. Her curiosity, despite her efforts to stay focused, was starting to grow. "We'll consider your offer," she said, her voice neutral, "but do not expect me to engage in your customs." The man nodded, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "Fair enough. But you know, if you change your mind, just ask. Humans have all sorts of tricks up their sleeves." Zetra didn't reply. She simply turned, her mind racing with questions. Why had this human spoken to her like that? And what was this thing he called Doggy style? As she boarded her ship, her thoughts kept drifting back to his words. Perhaps she had underestimated these humans. They were far more complex than she had imagined. And there was no doubt in her mind, this encounter would change the course of her mission in ways she never expected. Zetra couldn't shake the strange encounter with the human. As her ship hovered above the Earth, she watched the planet below, a swirl of blue oceans, vast continents, and towering cities. She had come here to learn, to study the most curious species in the galaxy. Yet she found herself thinking more about the strange human she had met than the task at hand. Her mind kept replaying his words. Doggy style? It's a human thing. The phrase kept echoing in her mind, the meaning still elusive, like a riddle she couldn't solve. She had read about human behavior, their social customs, and their intimate rituals. But this was new. And it made her feel something she couldn't quite explain. Zetra shook her head, refocusing. Stay on task, she reminded herself. Her mission was important. There was more to learn from these humans than whatever weird customs they might have. She needed to gather data, observe their behavior, understand their technology, and most importantly, report back to her people, but she couldn't get that smile of his out of her mind. The next day, Zetra ventured deeper into the city. Earth was nothing like she had imagined. She had studied human architecture before, tall buildings of glass and steel, sprawling streets filled with people of all shapes and sizes. But seeing it firsthand was a completely different experience. It was chaotic, alive with noise, motion, and endless possibilities. Everywhere she looked, there was something new to discover. She wandered through a marketplace, her blue skin attracting curious stares from the humans. They whispered among themselves, pointing and murmuring, but none of them dared approach her. She was an alien, something they had only seen in stories or on screens. Yet she couldn't help but notice the way they looked at her. There was a mix of awe, fear, and fascination. But there was also something else. She saw desire in their eyes, and it unsettled her. Zetra paused in front of a stall, pretending to inspect a small device. The vendor, a middle-aged human with graying hair, spoke to her in a slow, careful voice. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, clearly trying to be polite but unsure of how to interact with her. Zetra nodded, turning to him. "I am just looking." She tried to keep her voice neutral, but she could feel the strange tension in the air. These humans were unpredictable. The vendor smiled awkwardly. Right. Well, if you need anything, just let me know. We have a lot of human things here." He chuckled nervously. Zetra felt a strange tug in her chest. She didn't understand these people, but something in her couldn't help but be drawn to them. There was a vulnerability in their behavior, a certain fragility that she had never seen in any other species, and it intrigued her. She left the marketplace and wandered deeper into the city, her mind still occupied with the thoughts of the human from the other day. Why did he bring up that phrase, she wondered. She had never encountered a species so open about their sexuality, so casual in their approach to matters that were considered private or taboo in her own culture. Zetra, had always been focused on science, on logic and reason. Emotions and personal connections were things she barely understood, let alone cared to study. But this human, with his carefree attitude, was forcing her to confront something she hadn't considered before. She had studied their customs from a distance, but now she was experiencing them firsthand. It was confusing, unsettling, and strangely alluring. She found herself heading toward a park, hoping to clear her mind. The green space was peaceful, filled with the soft sounds of birds and distant chatter. Humans sat on benches, walking dogs, enjoying the sun. Zetra felt an odd sense of isolation as she observed them. She was an outsider, a strange being in their world. Yet there was something about the simplicity of their lives that drew her in. As she sat on a bench trying to process her thoughts, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw the same human from yesterday walking toward her, a grin spreading across his face. "Hey, you again," he said cheerfully. "Did you figure out what doggy style means yet?" Zetra's cheeks flushed, a sensation she wasn't used to. She quickly turned away, pretending to examine the trees around her. She had not expected to see him again, let alone so soon. Why is he so persistent? She wondered. "I don't understand. Your customs," she said, trying to sound calm. "I came here to study your species, not to learn about your personal habits." The human sat down beside her on the bench, still grinning. "Relax. I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable. I just thought we could talk more about Earth, what it's really like here. All that stuff they don't show you in textbooks." Zetra hesitated, feeling her curiosity win out over her unease. She had never met a human quite like this before. He was too informal, too carefree, but that was part of what fascinated her. "Okay," she said slowly. "I am listening." The human's grin softened as he turned to face her. "I know you're here to study us, but you've got to understand there's a lot about humans that doesn't make sense at first. We're messy, we're emotional, and yeah, we have some weird habits. But when you really get to know us, it's all about connection. And yeah, doggy style is just one way we connect. It's intimate, It's not just physical. It's emotional, too." Zetra looked at him, trying to decipher his words. Emotional? She had read about emotions, but she had never really understood them. To her, emotions were something that clouded reasoning, something that could cause mistakes. Yet here was this human, speaking about them like they were the key to understanding his species. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. She didn't know how to answer. Her mind was overwhelmed with the concept of human intimacy, of how much she still didn't understand about them. It was as if every answer she found only led to more questions. The human's smile faded as he noticed her confusion. "Hey, it's okay if you don't get it right away. I'm just saying, we humans have a way of connecting that's different. But if you ever want to know more, I'll be here." Zetra stood up, her thoughts swirling. Why do I feel so lost, she wondered. She wasn't supposed to feel lost. She was an alien, an explorer, a scientist. She wasn't supposed to get caught up in human emotions, human connections, but as she turned away and walked back toward her ship, Zetra knew one thing for certain. Her mission was no longer just about studying humans. It was about understanding them, and that, she realized, might be a far more complicated task than she had ever imagined. The sun had barely begun to set, casting a warm golden hue across the skyline of the bustling city below. Zetra sat on the edge of a high platform that overlooked the city, her gaze lost in the sprawling chaos. She had spent the last few days trying to understand the humans, their strange habits and confusing emotions. The more she observed, the more she found herself entangled in a web of questions that she couldn't untangle. The human she had met kept occupying her thoughts, his odd mixture of arrogance and sincerity, his casual attitude toward intimacy, and the way he made everything seem so uncomplicated. Her purpose for being on Earth was clear: to gather knowledge, to observe, to document. but she had not expected her mission to lead her down a path of such personal introspection. The human, with his persistence, had begun to challenge her ideas in ways she hadn't anticipated. He was constantly in her thoughts, drawing her closer to an understanding of their bizarre world, one that she wasn't entirely sure she wanted to comprehend. She had decided to take a break from her usual observations and wandered the city again, hoping to clear her mind. As Zetra strolled through the busy streets, she noticed that something was different today. There was a strange tension in the air. The people around her were moving more quickly, their faces tense, their conversations hushed. There was a sense of unease that hung over the city like a storm waiting to break. She felt it in her bones, but she couldn't understand the cause. Suddenly, she was jolted from her thoughts when she spotted a familiar face. A human man, a young man walking briskly towards her. It was him, the same one who had spoken about Doggy style and human customs. He had a look on his face that Zetra hadn't seen before. Intensity. There was something different about him, something hidden. He stopped in front of her, his eyes scanning the crowd as if looking for something or someone. "Zetra," he said, his voice low. There was no grin on his face this time, no casual tone. His expression was serious, focused, and almost urgent. "You're different," she said, her voice cautious. She had never seen him like this before. He had always been so easygoing, so confident. Now there was an edge to him that made her uneasy. "Yeah," he replied, his gaze shifting back to the crowd. "Something's happening. I need to talk to you privately." Zetra raised an eyebrow. This was strange. He had never been so direct before. "Why? What is it you want to talk about?" He looked around quickly, ensuring no one was paying attention to them. Then, with a quick motion, he led her down a narrow alleyway, away from the prying eyes of the bustling streets. Once they were out of sight, he turned to face her. "Listen, Zetra," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I didn't tell you the whole truth the other day. About me. About who I really am." Zetra was taken aback. "What are you talking about? Who are you?" The human swallowed, clearly hesitating before he spoke again. "I'm not just a regular human, I'm part of a group that's been watching you." Zetra's eyes narrowed. This was no longer just about a curious human with strange ideas about intimacy. This was something else, something dangerous, and she had walked right into it. "Watching me? For what purpose?" He stepped closer, his eyes locked onto hers. "I didn't want you to know this, not yet. But I think you need to understand what's really going on. You've been gathering information about us, right? Well, you're not the only one doing the gathering." Zetra's heart began to race. What is this human talking about? She wondered. She had no idea where this conversation was going, but she knew it was about to take a dangerous turn. "I'm part of a secret project," the human continued, lowering his voice. "We've been studying you too. Your kind, your technology, your abilities, and we've been tracking your movements. You're not just here by chance, Zetra. Someone sent you." Zetra took a step back, her instincts screaming at her to retreat. "I don't understand. I was sent here to observe humans. I'm here for research, not to be part of some project." The human's expression hardened. "I didn't want to be part of this either. But when they found out you were on Earth, things changed. They're watching us, Zetra, and if you don't understand that now, you will soon enough." She was, quiet for a moment, processing his words. It all seemed so much to take in at once. Who could be watching her? Who could possibly be behind this? Her mission had been simple: observe humans, gather knowledge, and report back. But now, everything had changed. She had become part of something larger, something more dangerous. And this human, this man, had been playing a role she hadn't seen before. "What do you want from me?" Zetra asked, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I want you to trust me," he said. "I know you've been studying us, but you don't know everything. You don't know the full story. I'll help you. But you have to trust me. There's more to this than you realize." Zetra looked at him carefully, weighing his words. Could she trust him? It wasn't easy for her to trust anyone, especially not a human. But something in his eyes told her that he wasn't lying. He was scared just like her, and that fear was something she could relate to. Before she could respond, she heard a noise. Footsteps approaching. The human turned sharply, his eyes wide. We need to go. Now. Without a word, he grabbed her arm and pulled her deeper into the alleyway, away from the noise of the street. Zetra, still processing everything, followed him. She had no choice. Whatever this was, whatever danger was lurking, she wasn't about to face it alone. And as they disappeared into the shadows, Zetra realized one thing. The true nature of her mission had just begun to unfold, and it was far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The air had a chill to it now, the kind that made you want to pull your jacket tighter around your shoulders and keep your head down. But Zetra had no time for such comforts. She was in the middle of a mess she hadn't signed up for, and every step she took felt like it was pulling her deeper into a web of secrecy and danger. The human, his name was David, had led her away from the crowded streets, deeper into the hidden parts of the city. They moved quickly, not speaking, but the tension between them was palpable. Zetra was still reeling from the revelation that someone had been tracking her every move. Her mission had always been about observation, about learning. But this was something else entirely. David stopped abruptly in front of a steel door, hidden in the shadows of a decrepit building. He glanced at Zetra, his eyes intense, before pushing the door open. The sound of creaking hinges echoed through the alley, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Zetra hesitated before stepping inside. The space was dark, lit only by the faint glow of fluorescent lights hanging from the ceiling. It looked like an abandoned warehouse, the kind of place where secrets were buried, away from prying eyes. Inside, a group of humans sat at a table, their faces grim. There were no smiles here, no casual gestures, just silent, hardened individuals who looked like they had seen too much. David walked ahead of her and nodded at one of the humans at the table, a tall woman with dark hair and an air of quiet authority. "This is Zetra," he said, introducing her without ceremony. "She's the alien we've been tracking." The woman didn't stand, but her eyes locked onto Zetra. "We know who she is," the woman said, her voice sharp and uninviting. "We also know why she's here. She's not just an observer, she's a potential threat." Zetra stiffened, not sure whether to be insulted or intrigued. A threat? She had only come to Earth to learn about the humans. Nothing more. And yet, she was being treated like a criminal. David turned to the woman. "She's not a threat. She doesn't know about the organization watching her, not yet. But she will." The woman narrowed her eyes. "And what exactly do you think you're doing, David? Bringing her here? She doesn't trust us, and we sure as hell don't trust her." Zetra's gaze shifted from David to the woman, then to the rest of the group. They were all watching her, their expressions unreadable. "They're waiting for me to prove something," Zetra realized. They wanted to know if she would comply, if she would be a part of this group they were all part of. David held up his hand, silencing the room. "We don't have a choice. If we want to survive what's coming, we need her. We need her knowledge. She's the only one who can help us fight back." Zetra felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Fight back? She didn't understand what was happening. What threat could possibly be bad enough to cause this group of humans, who looked like they had nothing in common, to join forces? The woman stood now, her movement graceful but quick. "David," she said, her voice calmer now, "you know how this works? Trust doesn't come easy, especially not with an alien." Zetra bristled at the word. She had always been alien, but it had never felt like an insult until now. Still, she remained silent, her mind racing. The situation was far worse than she had anticipated. She had wanted to observe and understand, not get caught up in some underground human resistance. "Group." David turned to her, his face hardening. "Zetra, they're right. You're here because your kind has a lot of answers we need. There's more at stake than you realize. There's an organization, one much bigger than any of us, that has been tracking you. They've been monitoring your species' every move, every step. Zetra felt the weight of his words. This was no longer about learning. This was about survival. Why didn't you tell me this before, she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Why the lies? David ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I couldn't. Not until I was sure I could trust you. I've been watching you too. I've seen your records. Your species. They don't just observe. They invade, they conquer, and they destroy. We don't have much time before they come for Earth. And if we don't work together, we'll never be ready. Zetra's mind swirled with disbelief. Was David right? Could the humans really be facing an invasion from her own people? Could her mission to observe Earth be part of something much darker? The woman from the table spoke again. David, you're asking her to take a leap of faith. That's a big risk, even for you. David's eyes flashed with determination. I'm asking her to choose. This is bigger than any of us. Earth needs her help, and if she refuses... Zetra's thoughts were a blur, but she knew one thing for certain. Refusing wasn't an option. This was no longer about understanding humanity. It was about choosing sides in a war she hadn't known existed. She was caught between two worlds, her mission to observe Earth and her loyalty to her people. She looked around at the faces in the room, fear, anger, and hope. They were all waiting for her decision. And for the first time since she had arrived on Earth, Zetra felt the weight of her role in this new, uncertain world. Tell me everything, she said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind inside her. I'll help you, but I need to understand what's happening. David nodded, relief flooding his expression. We'll explain, but be prepared, Zetra. The truth is more dangerous than you think, and as the group began to fill her in on the depths of the conspiracy, Zetra realized that her mission, her entire purpose, had just shifted. Now she wasn't just observing. She was part of a larger battle, one that would change everything she had ever known, and she wasn't sure she was ready for the consequences. The air was thick with tension, and for the first time since her arrival on Earth, Zetra found herself questioning every decision she had made. The group she had joined, a ragtag collection of humans with a shared, secret purpose, was beginning to show its cracks. There was a betrayal in the air, something she couldn't yet place, but the weight of it was undeniable. The more she learned, the more she realized that nothing, not even the truth, was as simple as it seemed. David had promised her answers, and for the first time since meeting him, he seemed like the only person she could trust. But trust, Zetra had learned, was a fragile thing. The faces in the room had shifted from cautious optimism to something darker, paranoia, fear. And now it seemed, even David had secrets he wasn't sharing with her. She sat in the corner of the dimly lit warehouse, her eyes fixed on the table, where the group had gathered. David was speaking to them in hushed tones, his face drawn tight with concern. The others, however, were whispering among themselves, casting glances her way as if they were unsure of her. The alien outsider. The unknown. She could feel the judgment in their eyes, even though none of them had spoken a word about it. What's going on, David? Zetra asked, her voice cutting through the low murmur of conversation. You said you needed my help. Why is everyone acting like I'm the enemy? David looked at her, his face clouded with conflict. It's not you, Zetra, it's complicated. There are things I didn't tell you, things I should have. She stood, her voice growing firmer. What do you mean? You said you trusted me. You said I was a part of this team. I thought I could trust you, David said, his eyes flickering with a mixture of guilt and frustration. But the truth is, you're not just an ally, you're a target. Zetra's breath caught in her throat. A target. She hadn't come to Earth to be a weapon, to be used, or hunted. She had come to study, to observe. But now, her presence here was wrapped in lies and secrets, like a trap that had been set long before she'd ever stepped off her ship. She took a step toward him. Who's the real enemy, David? Who's been pulling the strings from the start? David looked away, unable to meet her eyes. That was enough of an answer for Zetra. Her mind began to race, her alien instincts kicking in. The humans she had been observing, the ones she had tried to understand, were playing a game with her. She wasn't just a visitor. She was part of something far bigger, something she wasn't prepared for. "I trusted you," Zetra said, her voice low and dangerous. "And this is what you've brought me into?" Before David could respond, the door to the warehouse slammed open. A rush of cold air followed, and the members of the group stiffened, their hands reaching for weapons hidden beneath their clothing. Zetra's heart skipped a beat. The tension had gone from bad to worse. A figure stepped inside, tall, masked, and cloaked in black. Zetra didn't need to hear the voice to know who it was. The woman from the table, the one who had always been so cold, so detached from everything, stood frozen at the sight of the intruder. "You're too late," David said, his voice tight. "It's already happening." The masked figure tilted their head, surveying the room. "You've all failed. You think you can stop the inevitable? The organization isn't just going to let you play your games. We'll take her, your alien, whether you like it or not." Zetra's mind was spinning. This was the group, the one that had been tracking her all along, the organization David had warned her about. And now it seemed they had come to claim what they wanted. David moved toward her, his voice urgent. "Zetra, you need to leave. Now. Don't trust anyone here. They've betrayed you." Zetra stood motionless, her heart pounding. She had thought David was on her side, but now everything was in question. The group, her mission, even her sense of trust. All of it felt like a lie. Before she could make a decision, a shot rang out. The masked figure had fired, and the man who had been standing closest to them collapsed, a crimson stain spreading across his chest. David rushed to him, his face contorted with panic. "No, you're too late." Zetra's instincts kicked in. She was trained to react under pressure, to handle situations where betrayal and violence came in unpredictable forms. Without thinking, she stepped forward and lunged at the masked figure, knocking their weapon from their hand in one swift move. The figure stumbled back, their mask slipping just enough for Zetra to catch a glimpse of the person beneath, someone she recognized. It was the woman from the table, the one who had seemed to distrust her from the start. "You!" Zetra shouted. "You've been working for them this entire time?" The woman looked up at her, her face a mask of cold indifference. "I had no choice," she said, her voice steady. "This is bigger than you or me. You were always a pawn in their game, and now you've made things worse." David stood between them, his hand outstretched. "Zetra, don't listen to her. They're trying to manipulate you." Zetra's mind was in turmoil. Who was the real enemy? Was it David? The woman who had betrayed her? The organization that seemed to be everywhere? The answers were slipping further from her grasp, and in that moment, she didn't know who to trust. With a deep breath, Zetra made a choice. She turned, her eyes narrowing as she confronted the woman. "No more games," she said. "I'm done being a pawn. I'll find my own way." The warehouse fell silent as she walked toward the exit. Behind her, the sounds of chaos continued. But Zetra felt something shift inside of her. She had walked into this mission with a single purpose, to observe. But now that purpose had evolved. She wasn't here just to watch anymore. She was here to fight, to take control of her destiny, and no one, not even David, was going to stop her. The night was dark, the kind of night where every shadow felt alive and every noise seemed to carry a hidden meaning. Zetra stood at the edge of the city, staring out at the sprawling lights below. The chaos of the past few days had left her feeling disoriented, unsure of which direction to turn. Betrayal, secrets, half-truths, everything had been twisted into a maze that she couldn't navigate. Why had she trusted David? Why had she believed in the promises of the human resistance group? In the quiet, as she looked out at the city beneath, the weight of everything that had happened began to settle in. She had been used, manipulated, not just by the humans but by her own people. The truth had been hidden from her for so long, and now it seemed to be slipping away just as quickly. Zetra's breath formed small clouds in the cold air as she turned to face the alley behind her. The voices that had followed her, David's, the woman's, had all disappeared into the night, leaving her with only questions and fragments of truths that didn't fit together. But there was one thing Zetra knew with certainty. She couldn't trust anyone. Not even the people she had thought were allies. Suddenly she heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, but not the ones she had expected. Zetra tensed, her senses sharpening. This wasn't David. Whoever was approaching now had a different energy about them, more purposeful, more dangerous. She turned just in time to see a familiar figure emerge from the darkness, tall, imposing, and cloaked in black. It was the woman from the warehouse, the one who had betrayed her, but this time she was no longer masked. "Zetra," the woman said, her voice calm, almost too calm. "You're harder to track than I thought. Impressive." Zetra stepped back, her hands instinctively moving toward the concealed weapons at her side. "What do you want?" Her voice was icy, but her heart raced. She hadn't expected a confrontation so soon, not after everything that had happened. The woman smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was cold, calculating. "You've been asking the wrong questions, Zetra. You've been so focused on who betrayed you, you haven't asked why you're here in the first place, why you were sent to Earth, why they want you so badly." The words hit Zetra like a punch. She had been so consumed by the events unfolding around her that she hadn't fully understood her own role in this. What did they want with her? "I'm just an observer," Zetra said, though her voice wavered slightly. "That's all I've ever been. I came to learn, nothing more." The woman laughed softly, but it was a laugh devoid of humor. "You're lying to yourself. You've been playing the part of the curious alien, but you're not here by accident, Zetra. You're a weapon, one that's been hidden, just waiting to be unleashed." Zetra felt her stomach twist. A weapon? The idea was so foreign to her it made her feel sick. She had never been a weapon. She was a scientist, an explorer, a student of the universe. How could they turn her into something so destructive? "What are you talking about?" Zetra demanded, stepping forward, her fists clenched. "You want to say it? Say it outright. What am I really supposed to be?" The woman's eyes flickered with something like pity. "You were meant to be the trigger, the catalyst for the war. Your people, they, sent you here to observe, yes. But the truth is they've been watching Earth for years. They've been building something. They've been waiting for the right moment. And you, Zetra, are that moment. You were never meant to learn about Earth. You were meant to start the war." Zetra's mind reeled as the words sank in. A cold, sinking feeling spread throughout her chest, and for the first time since her arrival, she felt truly afraid. She had been sent to observe Earth, yes, but now she was faced with the terrifying possibility that her people, her own kind, had manipulated her from the very beginning. "I didn't know," she whispered, more to herself than the woman. "I had no idea." The woman's gaze softened for just a moment, but her expression quickly hardened again. "No one ever tells you the truth, Zetra. Not until it's too late." Before Zetra could respond, the woman moved swiftly, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward a nearby rooftop. Zetra struggled, but the woman's grip was strong, too strong. The cold night air rushed around them as they ascended the building, until they reached a rooftop that overlooked the entire city. The woman turned Zetra to face the distant lights, her eyes cold as steel. "Look at it, Zetra. Look at what your people are willing to destroy." Zetra's eyes widened as she looked out across the city. Every building, every person, every corner of Earth. It was alive, filled with stories, hopes, and dreams. And now Zetra realized it was all in jeopardy. "They've been watching us," the woman continued. "Your people, they believe Earth is weak, fragile. They believe we're nothing but insects, ripe for the taking. And you are the key to making it happen. That's why they wanted you here. Not just to observe, but to trigger the war. You were supposed to be their weapon to start the invasion. And you almost did, Zetra. You almost set it all in motion." Zetra's head spun as everything began to fall into place. Her mission, her people. Everything she had believed about herself, about why she was here, had been a lie. She wasn't an observer. She was a tool, a pawn in a war that had been brewing for centuries. "I don't want to be a part of this," Zetra said, her voice filled with determination. "I won't be." The woman's expression was unreadable. "It's too late for that. You've already made your choice. You've already taken sides. And now, you're either with us, or you're against us." Zetra's heart raced. The weight of the moment was suffocating, but she refused to let fear control her. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about doing what was right. She had a choice to make, and it wasn't about her people. It wasn't about the humans. It was about her. What she stood for, what she would become. With a calmness she hadn't known she possessed, Zetra turned to face the woman. "I'm not your weapon," she said firmly. "And I'll stop this war no matter the cost." And, with that, the city lights below seemed to flicker as though the very world itself was holding its breath. The night had fallen heavy, and the city stretched out before Zetra like a sprawling ocean of lights. She stood alone on the rooftop, the chill of the wind biting at her skin, but it was nothing compared to the storm raging inside her. The weight of the decisions she had made over the past few days, the alliances she had formed and broken, and the truths she had uncovered. Everything seemed to settle in her chest like a leaden weight. There was no escaping what had happened, but there was still a future to confront, a future that she could shape. The woman, Zetra never learned her name, had left her standing there, her words ringing in Zetra's mind. "You're either with us or against us." It had been a choice that Zetra hadn't wanted to make, but one she had been forced into. Her people, the ones she had once called her own, had lied to her. They had sent her here not to observe, but to prepare the way for an invasion that would destroy everything she had come to love about Earth. Zetra took a deep breath, steadying herself as she looked out at the horizon. The cities, lights twinkled like stars, and for a brief moment she could almost forget the chaos that had consumed her life. But that peace was fleeting. The war wasn't over. It hadn't even begun, and yet it was already threatening to tear the world apart. David's face flashed in her mind, his pleading eyes, his desperate attempt to make her see the truth, even when he had been just as much a part of the game as anyone else. He had been the one to lead her into this mess, the one who had asked for her trust when there had been so little left to give. And now, he was gone. The human resistance group was scattered, their efforts shattered by betrayal and confusion. But there was something that remained, a thread of hope, however fragile, that Zetra clung to. She had made her choice. She had chosen to stand with Earth, to fight for a world she had come to understand in ways she never expected. She wasn't just an alien anymore. She was part of something bigger, something worth protecting. Suddenly, a noise from behind her broke her reverie. Zetra turned, her heart skipping a beat, only to see a familiar figure emerge from the shadows. David. He was back. "You didn't have to come back," Zetra said, her voice calm but tinged with uncertainty. "You left. You walked away." David stopped a few feet away, his expression tired but resolute. "I didn't leave, Zetra. I ran. There's a difference." He paused for a moment before speaking again. "I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't know what I was asking of you. I thought you'd help us, but I never considered what it would cost you. I should have trusted you more." Zetra studied him for a long moment. She had known David long enough to understand that he was as much a part of the chaos as she was. He had been raised to believe in the resistance, in fighting for a cause that now seemed all too ambiguous, all too fleeting. She had been a tool in his game, and he had been a part of hers. But somewhere in between, they had both changed. They had both learned what it meant to question everything. "What happens now?" she asked quietly, her eyes still locked on the city. "Do we still fight? Do we try to stop the war before it starts?" David took a step closer, his voice low but unwavering. "We fight, Zetra. We stop them. Together. We don't just stop the invasion. We stop the idea that anyone, human or alien has the right to destroy what others have built. Earth doesn't belong to anyone but those who live here. Zetra looked at him, something softening in her chest. It's a choice, she thought. And this is the right one. The war might not have started yet, she said slowly, turning to face him fully. But we can make sure it doesn't happen. We have the power to stop it. Together. David smiled, a small, tired smile, as if the weight of his own choices was beginning to lift. Together, he echoed. For the first time since she had arrived on Earth, Zetra felt a sense of clarity. She wasn't just an outsider anymore. She wasn't just a pawn in someone else's game. She was part of a cause that mattered, part of a world that deserved to live, to thrive, and to be protected. But even as hope flickered in her heart, a deeper question remained. Could they truly stop the war? Could Earth, could humanity, stand up to the forces that were pulling at its seams, ready to tear it apart? Zetra didn't have all the answers, but she had one thing now that she hadn't before: a purpose. Together, with David and the remnants of the human resistance, Zetra would fight to protect this world. They would expose the truth, dismantle the forces that threatened to consume Earth, and ensure that the future of humanity was in its own hands, not the hands of invaders. And as the first rays of dawn broke across the horizon, Zetra felt a renewed sense of resolve. The battle was just beginning, but for the first time in days she felt ready to face it. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning, and she would be there to make sure Earth had a future to fight for.